Behavior Change, Communication at Scale. This session today, we will discuss that and many topics on the Hygiene, Behavior Change, Communication Coalition. And with that, I would like to begin with a few reflections. Our speakers today will be Leonard Tad. He is the Deputy Head of Human Development Department at the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. Also joining us will be Lisa Rouge, Water and Sanitation Advisor with FCDO. Helena Dollymore, Senior Manager, Global Sustainability, Unilever. Robert Belvis, Associate Professor of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Ruth Luftus, Senior Private Sector Advisor with WaterAid. And on behalf of Dr. Maria Corazon Dumalo will be Margaret Lim and Sarah Kosgai, who will be representing the Program Manager, Public Health, AMREF in Africa. And closing our session will be Anne Thomas, Senior Advisor, Sanitation with UNICEF. Thank you. So our session today will begin with an introduction to the HBCC, followed by some remarks and a moderated session. Again, asking the question, what is the public-private partnership model? How do we make this work? What can we learn from the HBCC? And what similar initiatives can we consider in future response? We will also then have case studies from country offices, sharing learnings from the field, showcasing what selected partners have been able to do in terms of mass media behavior change and WASH interventions. Followed by that, we will have an audience reflection, questions and answer, and then we will move into looking into the future. How can HBCC be the model, the tools for future, a collaborative model that can be a blueprint for future? We'll have a look at that and looking at it also in scale for humanitarian crises. So with that, we have a few words for Sanjip Mehta, who is the the Unilever Hindustan, Unilever head, please. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session where we celebrate the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition and its phenomenal achievements over the rather couple of challenging 2 years. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on people. Millions of lives and livelihoods have been lost. It has also exposed key vulnerabilities of our society, such as our fragile health systems. Water, sanitation and hygiene has always been an area that is important to our business, and we have always looked for ways to impact people's health positively. Our deep consumer insights and a strong portfolio of health and hygiene brands like Lifebuoy or Domestos means that as a company, we are very well placed to tackle sanitation and hygiene challenges. And we are pleased to join forces with the UK government during the early days of the pandemic to help improve access to hygiene and help people protect themselves against the virus. But we still know that there is a long way to go to reach SDG 6, with everyone having access to water, hygiene and sanitation by 2030. With over 2 billion people still not having access to hand washing facilities and over 3.5 billion people to safe sanitation, we need to be ambitious with scale. Public-private partnerships like the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition are central to Unilever's approach to improving access to hygiene and sanitation. As we are learning to live with the pandemic, we must step up efforts to close gaps and build the resilience of our communities to future disease outbreaks and pandemics. Through a compass strategy, we have committed to improving people's health through the work of our brands like Lifebuoy and Domestos, and our aim is to reach 1 billion people by 2030. But we can only do it by working together with the governments, other businesses and civil society, bringing together our complementary resources and capabilities to achieve the scale of change our society needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And some great words from Sanjeev Mehta, who is the chair and managing director of the Hindustan Unilever. We hear impact, we hear sustainability, we hear scale, we hear billions. And so to talk us through a little bit more, I'd love to introduce Mr. Leonard Tad, and please go ahead with FCDO.
Thanks. Is this live? Thanks. So just some really short words just at the top of the meeting from the funding partner for this and the partner, the UK government, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. So it's been a very exciting journey. It started very, very quickly. If you cast your mind back to February, March 2020, the uncertainties related to what this would be, no vaccine, not really clear what the main infection pathways would be. Would the virus mutate? I mean, the world was just locking down, and gosh, what an impact it has been. But we knew that hand washing, we already had good science around the role of hand washing in protecting against respiratory disease, and we thought it's so likely that hand washing would be a key part of breaking that the infection pathway that we wanted very quickly to work with partners, particularly Unilever and the delivery partners, in ways that we could move to scale very, very quickly to help with one element of the initial work to help at the start of the pandemic. We also knew that we needed to learn and be learning very quickly. So it was great to partner with knowledge organisations like the London School for Hygiene and Tropical Medicine around what the best science was telling us in real time. Did we need to quickly revise and adapt the ways that we were working? So I think the agreements for this were signed in the first week of lockdown, and it was very, very quickly at scale. You'll hear a bit more this afternoon about the scale of it and some of the things that we learnt. Also from a longer term, and Sanjeev referred to this, water, sanitation and hygiene. People used to say that sanitation was the Cinderella, the missing link in that, but hygiene really hadn't had nearly the attention to. So it was just very exciting in the sector to have a very large program that was really focused first and foremost on hygiene. So it's been very exciting, and we look forward to some of the discussions and your questions this afternoon. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great. And we'll have you back a little bit later towards the end as we look into the future. So thank you very much. So I think now maybe if I can call to the floor, Helena and Lisa, as well as Robert, please. So I think we start with the speaking order. Good. So we'll start, I believe, with Lisa. Thank you. So Lisa Reg is a water and sanitation hygiene advisor, and Lisa has been with FCDO for about 10 years. We're delivering WASH programs.
The COVID-19 crisis has been a human tragedy, impacting the life of every person on the planet. And at the same time, the pandemic has revealed major inequalities around the world, particularly when it comes to hygiene. It's why the Global Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition, HBCC, was established. The HBCC is a unique partnership between Unilever, with their expertise in hygiene education, behaviour change and mass media communication, and the UK government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, who are well placed to rapidly deploy a global programme in the fight against COVID-19.
Unilever was founded with a vision to make cleanliness commonplace, and today we continue that mission during this COVID-19 pandemic. We've been working with partners like UNICEF, the UN Refugee Agency and the UK government to make good hygiene accessible to everyone, everywhere.
Hygiene is a pivotal part of the UK government's approach to tackling COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. Early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, our network of embassies and high commissions around the world and our great existing partnerships meant that we were in a unique position to respond quickly. To achieve change, the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition draws on the expertise of 21 partners and is supporting some of the world's most vulnerable countries to promote hand washing and good hygiene, both to help tackle COVID and also to prevent the spread of other killer diseases.
And that has been the HBCC's driving ambition: to provide care and support to limit the spread of COVID-19 in vulnerable communities around the world. This £100 million initiative has allocated funds to 21 NGO and UN organizations to run programs in 3 key areas: improving infrastructure through the installation of hand-washing facilities and by providing hygiene products like soap, sanitizer, and bleach; through hygiene behavior change, awareness and education, improving hygiene across schools, healthcare facilities, and communities; and through support for vulnerable groups such as health workers, refugees, and migrant workers. The coalition also works closely with leading academics, such as the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who have provided scientific advice to support HBCC projects.
20 countries across 6 regions, UNICEF supported government-led coordination of COVID-19 responses, delivering hand washing and hygiene behavior change interventions. We also worked to ensure that people were not cut off from their access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene services in the midst of the pandemic.
Thanks to HBCC, CARE is providing life-saving support to women and girls who are on the front lines of fighting the pandemic, but who are also most vulnerable to the virus because of their roles at home and at work.
تعلمنا يعني التباعد الجسدي وكيفية غسل الإيدين بطريقة صحية، يعني مدة 20-40 ثانية بالكحول وبعدين 60 ل 40 دقيقة بالصابون وارتداء الكمام بطريقة صحيحة.
Thanks to this award-winning private-public coalition, the scale of our impact has been huge. It is important, now more than ever, that we do not forget the critical importance of hygiene access and education in preventing infectious disease. As we build back from this pandemic, we urge all key decision makers to prioritize communities' access to safe water, hygiene, and sanitation. Today, we can make sure that no one is left behind and that everyone, everywhere, has access to these essential, life-changing resources.
And that video actually really ties in nicely the scale of the campaign and as well the breadth and depth of what it did. And so now we move on to our next session, which is really actually going into talk more about the public-private partnership model. And with that, how did we make it work? Unpacking a little bit of what we saw in that video. And to start us with maybe some remarks on this will be Lisa Raj, who is with the FCDO. Lisa, please, you're welcome.
Thanks. So thank you very much. Great to see everyone here today. So I'm just going to say a few words about kind of back to the beginning of the pandemic. Leonard mentioned, kind of the utter scale of things. I imagine everyone in this room was thinking, gosh, what are we going to do? How do we deliver this at scale? There are 2.3 billion people without, basic hand hygiene services. We know that, and there's about half, we've learned this morning, about half of the healthcare facilities do not have basic hand hygiene at the point of care. So how do you deliver, hand hygiene at scale? How do you deliver a behavior change response? That's really kind of daunting. So when we were thinking about how do we do this, I think the first question was scale and local context. It was so important that behaviour change interventions are anchored in the local context, understanding what the local customs are, practices, and hygiene. So that was absolutely critical. And who best to do that really than the network of NGOs who do this every day already and who have that expertise on the ground. So I think that was a big element of kind of how we looked at how to fund this. Then, of course, there's another element, which is how do we manage, getting funds out rapidly to the huge number of NGOs that we needed in order to kind of deliver the funds that were made available to do this. So the second bit there are 4 bits really, it's just so that you can follow what I'm saying. The second bit is really building on an existing relationship that we had with Unilever through our research and evidence kind of work through a program that's called the Transform program, which really works on market-based hygiene initiatives, kind of bringing hygiene and hand washing products to the last mile. And through that existing relationship, I think came the idea that actually having this coalition could be great. And it would really bring together kind of Unilever's experience in media on behaviour change and hygiene. But what it turned out was also a massive in-kind donation that came to match UK funds. And that was, extremely powerful in terms of kind of what we were able to deliver and how we were able, it turns out, to help NGOs also use funds efficiently for behaviour change communication rather than buying, soap and hand hygiene products and the PPE that went into healthcare facilities and so on. So that was really important. I'm trying to be brief. The third element was, as Leonard mentioned, was about learning and making sure that the evidence that we already had was kind of informing the behaviour change communication campaigns on the ground, but also that we were feeding that back to each other. And I know Robert will talk more about that, so it's really important. So really the 4th point was around coordination and creating the space for people to be able to learn, for national governments who are also feeling overwhelmed to be able to ask the question, to coordinate with others around what is the most effective intervention, what are we learning, how is the virus progressing, what does that mean for our behaviour change communication. And so we as a collective, created the COVID-19 Behaviour Change Forum. Perhaps many of you are part of that. And that was created really as a network of kind of practitioners, but also government officials across UK government, but across others as well, to bring us all together. So, for example, making use of our behavioural insights unit in the UK government to help kind of learn from the experience of developing that in our country and how that could serve others. And the other obviously advantage, I think, for us was just making use of our diplomatic network and our missions across the world to kind of help bring people together, as well as you all know, the coordination challenges at the beginning of the pandemic were massive. So just making sure that those mechanisms existed. So I will pass on to my colleagues, but tremendous experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it gives a very good overview and background of the scale and the kind of coordination that you really needed to do from the public sector side. So now let's talk a little bit for the private sector side. Helena, you are the Global Sustainability Manager in Unilever. So please talk us a little bit about that period of time too.
Yeah, and I think when we cast our minds back, as Leonard was saying at the beginning, we really didn't know where this was going to end. We knew that the virus was spreading like crazy. Countries were locking down by the day. And, life as we know it was changing as we all experienced in our own lives. But most of all, for those people in countries where access to the ability to wash your hands with soap did not exist. And all of us, that was top of our minds and how we could help. First, a bit about Unilever and why is a company like Unilever involved in an emergency humanitarian response? Well, Unilever is a company that makes many of our favourite brands that you have all probably got in your kitchen sink cupboard, perhaps in your bathroom cabinet cupboard or in your food cupboards at home. Our products are used by 2.5 billion consumers every day, so over a third of the world's population. And we are a purpose-led business. So we believe that you must do the right thing And that guides all of our actions. And we try to do the right thing, not just within our own business and our immediate operations, but within our whole sphere of influence. So right through our value chain, but also through to our consumers and the society in which they live in and they are influenced by. Hygiene has been a very strong part of our heritage, as Sanjeev said in his message. Our company was founded in the 19th century in Northern England by William Lever, and he founded Lever Brothers, as it was then, with a vision of making cleanliness commonplace. And that's something that we still live by today. As a purpose-led business, we have 5 big strategic goals, and one of those is to improve people's health and well-being. And that's something where hygiene plays a huge role. So since 2010, we have improved the health and hygiene of over 1.3 billion people. As you can imagine, through that work, which is led by our brands like Domestos, our toilet cleaner, Lifebuoy, our soap, and many others, we have developed a very strong, deep network of behaviour change programmes, whether that is on wash in schools, hygiene behaviour change, encouraging people to wash their hands with soap, or the operation and maintenance of wash, as Domestos, our toilet brand, increasingly works on. We have a huge wealth of resources. We have tried and tested what works and what doesn't work, and we have those materials to very quickly scale up and for people to use and access to improve hygiene and wash behaviour change. So that's really where we came in when the pandemic struck. All of these programmes, since 2010, we've always worked very closely with NGOs and UN partners to deliver those programmes. And we've always worked very closely on the ground with them. So when the pandemic struck, like many businesses around the world, we were thinking both how do we actually adapt our own business to cope with what we're seeing, and in our case, as one of the world's biggest soap companies, that meant massively ramping up production of soap and sanitizer, but also thinking how can we actually do our bit as a business and do our bit in this crisis, particularly as a company with so much relevant behaviour change expertise. And so we came together with the FCDO and brought our strong expertise in hygiene behaviour change, also our access to products and our close working relationships with so many of the partners that became part of the coalition, to really do that, because we believe that not only did we as a company have a moral imperative to act, we had to do something and use our expertise to help, but also as a business, it doesn't make big business sense for us to have some countries where we manage to come through the pandemic and move on and people can keep themselves safe, and pockets of infection in other places in the world that mean those economies, those countries can't go back to normal. But crucially also, those could be the sources of new variants and new outbreaks in future. So that's also where the business case for our involvement came in, and both of those are important. So we came together with the FCDO and with the London School to set up the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition. And I think in those early days, we didn't have, a completely clear idea of what we would end up doing, but it came together very quickly with goodwill and lots of fairly late nights at the computer in our lockdown homes. Bit by bit, we built this coalition, which has achieved what we will hear more about today.
Yeah, thank you, Helena. That really, again, provides a good background of the time, but also from the business perspective, the impact you had and also the purpose as well. So to then kind of round that off in terms of the evidence side of it, because we can talk from the technical and evidence side, so maybe I can just pass this on to Robert to share a little bit about from the perspective of the Hygiene Hub and the lessons, because it really does close in this technical, the evidence aspects of this partnership.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Again, I'm Robert Tribelbus. I'm speaking today as the director of the COVID-19 Hygiene Hub. Next slide. I am ill-prepared. I didn't realize I wouldn't have a copy of these slides. So every now and then I'm going to glance
That's
back.
all right. You can stand. You can stand right here.
The COVID-19 Hygiene Hub, in the spirit of partnership, was co-funded by the Hygiene Behavior Change Coalition and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with 3 express purposes. Really to help actors, primarily based in low and middle income countries, rapidly design, share, and adapt COVID-19 response programs. Now, we did this through a variety of modalities that I'll talk a little bit about as we go forward, but these included the development of new resources, an online system of connecting with an expert. It was basically like an online chat function where you could, like when you're buying something off the internet and you need to talk to customer service. That was a bunch of academics all over the world. And finally, to connect with other organizations. Now, again, the COVID-19 Hygiene Hub, it's housed at the London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, but it is not an LSHTM only institution. We had a global steering committee, and we really drew from a large global technical team from academic and technical organizations around the world and kind of working through some of our things. I won't read them all. It's all on our website. We have a very nice website, so hygienehub.info. Next. So part of what we were kind of our goal here was really focus on dissemination and learning in the pandemic. I think, again, everyone is kind of asking us to think back to March 2020 or April 2020. No one knew what was happening. I think we were all prepared for a little bit of time of lockdown. But also at this time, there were new guidelines being developed practically every day. It wasn't clear how those guidelines should be turned into implementable strategies. And that was really where we worked with our technical teams, with a lot of our NGO partners, to really help kind of work with organizations to translate science and evidence into practice. Now, we did this on our website through various things. We had a kind of global compilation of case studies of innovative COVID-19 response programs. These grew throughout the pandemic as we'd find innovative programming. People could write those up, and a way for partners to share with one another in a structured way how they're kind of learning and adapting to COVID-19. We also had webinars that we were running with FCDO's COVID Behavior Change Forum, as well as other organizations. We developed a whole library of technical resources online that were organized by topic. This is really where a lot of our academic partners came in. As these guidelines came up, we would write new kind of guides to the guidelines to help people understand the science behind COVID-19, the science behind behavior change, and the science behind monitoring and evaluation. And finally, a number of learning briefs where we kind of synthesize lessons learned from our partners and from our interactions with partners to help inform future programs. Next. So just some of the numbers, and this one is very far behind me. I won't go through all of the top line, but we did kind of end up working with over 300 different organizations throughout the pandemic, which is kind of quite a lot for kind of academics who are typically referred to as slightly removed from what's happening in the real world. But we really were kind of engaging with quite a number of people. We developed over kind of 200 online resources. Since the start of the pandemic, these have been read. I'm going to say 400,000 just because I don't have the most recent number, but it's actually larger than that. So our resource library has been accessed more than 400,000 times. We've really been able to kind of design, I had little to do with it. It was a very large team. Resources that were highly accessible to a variety of organizations. And we also had in-depth technical collaborations that we formed with over 73 organizations during kind of the peak 18 months to 2 years of the pandemic. This final slide is some of the lessons learned from those interactions with over 200 organizations. I can go back to that during kind of some of the closing remarks, but just some kind of what we learned from partners and how that reflects in kind of future public-private partnerships and future pandemic response programs. So.
Yeah,
I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. And I think let's have a little bit of some reflections through some reflections at the time. So maybe I start with you, Lisa. Just trying to think about you talked about sort of the early days, trying to bringing everybody together, and I just wanted to know. So, from your perspective, I mean, this isn't the first time that you've had to work like this. How was this partnership different? From other sort of hygiene, behavior change, mass programs that you've done in the past, and that the FCDO has worked with and created.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think what was different about this one is it was really anchored on the kind of behavior change aspects. And it was really about kind of bringing this to scale. How do we work through mass media? How do we work through digital? To what extent, in the context of COVID, can you do face-to-face? And if you can't, then, how do you deliver that? And I think what was really different about this intervention is that we managed to do this at scale because everyone worked together with the help of kind of the London School and the evidence out there and on how to do that. But we also learnt from that and reprogrammed and reassessed every time whether our messaging was getting through. We adapted it to the local context. And again, it's not we, it's kind of all of you on the ground who are delivering the work. But I think that's where this coalition was really powerful and hopefully has also allowed us to learn, a lot around behavioral insights. How do we bring them to scale? How do we work through the mass media? What works and what doesn't? And of course, there's still a lot more to learn, and we need to learn about how to do this sustainably. But yeah, I think that was a really big win from the coalition.
Thank you. Well said. And I think maybe just moving on, maybe you can pass it to Helena too, because you can also do it. You can answer this. But Helena, I mean, when you look at what you've discussed it, I think you've shared a lot. But in terms of what Unilever brought to this situation, but even looking, what can business partnerships, how can private sector further this play in this kind of public partner?
I think where you have to start from it, as a business, I think most businesses would look in the same way. What can you bring to the table in terms of expertise? What's your strength that you can bring to the table? And as I've spoken about, for us, hygiene behaviour change is really what we do. It's our bread and butter, and hygiene products as well. So for the HBCC, we obviously brought a lot of hygiene products, 72 million units to be precise. Just to give you a sense of that scale, 69 million bars of soap. That's the equivalent of a lot of African elephants.
2,000.
If you were to weigh it
2,000
African elephants.
Incredible.
Enough disinfectant to fill 2 Olympic swimming pools. I wouldn't want to swim in that though. And, a huge amount of disinfectant as well. And we were able to get that out there at a time when the price of these items on the open market was shooting up because supply was limited. And also, as some partners have pointed out to us as well, particularly when they're working with vulnerable communities that are used to getting the kind of bottom of the market generically branded, it gave people dignity as well at a time when they often didn't have dignity, or a situation where they often didn't. So we donated products, but the biggest part of our contribution, as well as helping to manage the coalition, was our expertise in hygiene behaviour change and bringing that to the table through freely making available all of our behaviour change materials that we'd developed over years of on-ground work, things like Mum's Magic Hands, things like the School of Five, which can be used in schools and health settings, and a range of other assets, which we offered to translate as well into many different languages. But also, we created something unique for the pandemic. Really, it wasn't something that we intended to do at the outset, but it came through from the conversations with partners that a clear need was developing for that. And as Lisa suggested, countries are locking down one by one. It's quite difficult for some of our more traditional NGOs. Their bread and butter way of working is interpersonal contact, going door to door, going to a health centre, going to a school and working with a community in that setting. And that became impossible in a lockdown where you could spread the virus. So we actually were able to bring in our expertise as a company that uses mass media and marketing to reach our consumers every day through a range of channels. We brought that expertise, we brought our in-house experts to help build a campaign focused on what are the key behaviours you need to prevent yourself from getting COVID-19, focusing on the 4 key behaviours: keeping distance, washing your hands with soap, wearing a mask, and also paying attention to surface hygiene as well. And it's called the Password campaign. You can see the key slogan: hands, face, space, surface, which ironically, our team of experts came up with that completely independently to the campaign that was developed. Those of you in the UK will be familiar with the Hands, Face, Space campaign. But it worked really well, and we translated this into 30 languages in 18 countries. It's been used by a huge number of our partners in the coalition, and we estimate it's been seen by at least 1/5 of a billion people, 200 million people. And it was just something where really we could work very closely with our NGO partners to fill a gap that they had, an expertise that they weren't used to doing mass media campaigns. Some of them told us they really didn't know where to start, and also use our relationships with media buying agencies on the ground to help get them the best rates and land this material in the right places as well, particularly in countries where, those of us who are from countries where our governments ran public health communication campaigns will remember those, but not all governments are able to do that. So really filling that gap as well.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And talking a little bit about legacies, maybe to Robert, if you can pass the mic over. You've highlighted the London School of Hygiene Tropical Medicine. It was the chair or sort of managing the Hygiene Hub. Can you talk a little bit of what you see as a legacy for the Hygiene Hub?
Yeah, thanks. So I think kind of at the hub, I think it put us in a very unique position where our engagement with a broad set of partners who anyone here who works for an NGO knows that there was lots of different streams of funding flying around related to COVID-19. So our engagement with any partner wasn't necessarily reflective of their engagement with every single donor that they were working with, all of their programs. So our lessons and any of our learnings aren't just reflective of HBCC, but kind of the field as a snapshot during this COVID pandemic. I think we're still kind of distilling some of the key lessons and how do we take these forward. I think a couple of things were there was a massive tendency we all had to kind of try to reinvent the wheel. So COVID-19 might be new, but hand washing is not. It goes back a little bit earlier, and kind of it existed for quite some time. And so making sure that we're kind of finding ways to kind of document and keep this information, everything that we've learned on hand. So in future pandemics, we don't necessarily kind of try to start over with something like that. We also kind of, there was a very slow adaptation to some of the new ways of working. I think we are all in a position of privilege and understand now the ability to work from home or to go to our office. But that was a rough transition, particularly for a lot of in-country staff who suddenly, particularly for kind of organizations with a large number of foreign nationals who were working there, and the amount of kind of coordination and information burden that was placed on staff, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic, was quite intense. And when we talk about work-life balance and making sure that we're caring about our worker well-being, this applies to everyone that's working with us, not just kind of those of us who are in headquarters offices. And I think kind of the main thing, I can kind of discuss some of the other ones offline later. The existing barriers to hand washing just didn't magically go away with COVID-19. I think everyone here has made reference to kind of the huge numbers of people who still don't have access to basic water, to basic sanitation services, and to basic hygiene services. And a lot of our partners were really finding innovative ways to address hygiene promotion in places where water is scarce, to working with partners on the ground to kind of find new ways to kind of work around some of these challenges. So I think there was a lot of innovation during COVID-19 to address some of these challenges, and I hope we can be a part of documenting and making sure that those lessons translate to the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert. And we will actually get a little bit of a view of what are some of those lessons learned and have some bit more on country examples. So with that, we're going to do a little bit of a switch and a flip, and I will just ask you guys to take the seats in here or wherever is comfortable. And I would like to now invite to give us a little bit of more of country examples. I would like to invite Sarah Koskay. Maybe we can keep this chair here for Sarah for now. It's okay. Sarah Koskay, and Sarah is with AMREF. And then we will also have, if you want to join here, you can, oh, sorry. Okay, or you. Oh, I see. Okay. Because I have sorry, I apologize. Is it to you to go first? Is it set up to go? Okay, great. So then I'll introduce Ruth. Sorry, Sarah. We're all good here, huh? So great. So introducing Ruth is with WaterAid, and please, Ruth, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks ever so much for inviting me to join this session. So I'm speaking on behalf of Dr. Om, who unfortunately is not here today. I will do my best to convey his messages and his knowledge. He's our resident WaterAid expert, so I'm filling his big shoes today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our multi-country initiative. It focused on 26 different countries, and for the HBCC element, in the first year of the HBCC, we focused on 6 countries and currently now focusing on 4 countries. The target population we reached was 73 million, which is quite impressive and quite astounding, for a duration of 12 months. So we really focused on multiple different settings. So we had schools, communities, public settings, workplaces, and the 5 behaviours that Helena has already mentioned. So hand washing with soap, wearing a mask, maintaining physical distances, frequently cleaning those highly touched surfaces, and the final one is vaccine uptake, which is now what we're really focusing on as well. So our approach was really focused on behaviour-centred design, and the approach that WarTrade took was really to try and drive motives of changes in behaviour. So the idea of disgust or wanting to be affiliated with pride or status by washing your hands and not being ill. That sort of thing works really well, and it's been proven through these studies. And the desired outcomes of improving your awareness, increasing your hygiene behaviours, and obviously access to these facilities is crucial as well. And we also leverage some existing country campaigns, so the Clean Green Pakistan, for example, which some of you may be familiar with. So I'm going to now touch on some of the achievements that we managed to do. So mass media has been mentioned loads, and it's something that WarTrade uses quite a lot. So mass media, progressive assets. So we did loads of stuff via promotional TV and radio adverts, so to build the knowledge and the science through a big audience. And then a second element of that is driving emotional behaviours. So driving motions and feelings to drive certain emotions, like the ones I mentioned about disgust or kind of fear of not washing your hands and being ill. And finally, a really successful one has been using trusted people, like celebrities or stars in that local country. People listen to people they trust and love. So that worked really well. So through this mass media progressive kind of campaign, we reached 151 million people. So the second element building on that is community intervention. So we've done the educational piece, we've done the mass media, but we need to have these reinforcing behaviours everywhere that people are looking. So the one that really stands out to me is this cow on the far right side. You know, in some certain countries, cow is a very iconic animal. So everybody knows how long a cow usually is, and that's probably how far you should stay from your peer. Yeah. Don't go closer than the length of a cow. So really just little things like that work really successfully. And then finally, we've got to have the physical hardware. So just over 1,000 hand washing facilities, permanent or semi-permanent facilities were put in place. And we've already heard loads from the Unilever team about how many having products as being valuable to facilitating this stuff. So behavioural change products, over 1.8 million were distributed. So hygiene kits, soaps, sanitisers, all those good things we've heard lots about. And as you can see in these pictures, all the messaging and the reinforcing nudges and behaviours and stuff are communicated a lot. So now I'm just going to wrap up with 5 key learnings that we learned from being involved in this programme, but also through the WarTrade work that we've been involved in over and over the years. So the first thing, science and evidence-based campaign. We need to target behaviours and we need to target diseases that are sensitive, that have sensitive behaviours. So COVID-19 was triggered by certain things, so we need to tailor the science and the campaign around COVID-19. And we also really encourage developing a creative process in that first pillar as well. Second pillar, second learning and outcome, higher reach and exposure using multiple trusted assets. I've already spoken about lovely celebrities and people we trust. That's proven to be really successful. And another really important thing to flag here, when we're building our assets or the things we're trying to change behaviours with, we want to try and make sure they're captivating, they're a progressive campaign. We think about the branding, we think about how we translate it into the local language. We pick those local influencers from those countries. And we have diversity of assets and multiple targets. That's been a real key to success. So the third learning, pre-designed hand washing facilities. So in a time of a global emergency, getting a contractor on board can take quite a long time. So having these pre-designed, context-specific and inclusive designed hand washing facilities can be really central. And again, you can see some good nudging there of the pictures above the hand washing facilities to make sure they're done. Fourth learning, inclusivity and sustainability. So we always recommend using an equity and inclusion framework from the start of a project. And finally, you know, this probably isn't a learning that any of you are not familiar with, but we've got to work with our partners. This is a fantastic example of working in partnership, leveraging, scaling, using innovation and being creative together. So I'd like to thank you very much for giving me the time, and hopefully I've done Om justice.
I think you've done a great job. Thank you very much. Very nice to see how WaterAid was really able to bring in their expertise combined with the campaign to really scale things up. And I think next we have here is, if I'm following my proper notes now, is Margaret Lim, and she's representing the Ministry of Education. Actually, unfortunately, Dr. Maria Dumlao, because of logistics reasons, is flying in and cannot make it in time. So thank goodness that we have Margaret who can share a little bit on behalf of that. So thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Belinda. Good afternoon to all the participants of today's session. So as Belinda nicely explained, I'm Margaret Lim, and I'm presenting on behalf of Dr. Maria Corazon Dumlao, the Chief Program Officer of the Chief of the School Health Division of Department of Education of Philippines. And in the next few minutes, please allow me to share what it takes to institutionalize hygiene behavior change within the Department of Education. So this is all purely from the perspective of the government. First of all, we recognize that the Department of Education is the main responsible agency for WASH in schools and pandemic preparedness and response for schools, the venue where the entire school-age population spends half of their day. At the central office of the Department of Education, we created a national WINS policy and implementing guidelines, which clearly states the objectives, implementing mechanism, as well as roles and responsibilities across all levels of education governance. To support schools and subnational levels on complying with these guidelines, a set of capacity development tools have been developed and broadly disseminated through a department memo, as well as via the DepEd WINS knowledge management platform. As you could see in the knowledge map here on the screen, COVID-19 infection prevention and control, which includes management support tools developed in close collaboration with HBCC, is fully integrated into the Department of Education's capacity building concept right here at the bottom of the screen. Furthermore, with scale in mind from the start, we have been running a massive open online course on WASH in schools, which includes pandemic preparedness and response, which has trained over 35,000 participants to date. Recently, we have launched a separate course focused on infection prevention and control to increase resilience of schools, addressing school heads, teachers, and concerned staff at the subnational level. Zooming into a few of the COVID-19 management support tools from earlier, you'll see that they bear the logos of all main development partners of the Department of Education. They all joined forces and used this material. It was important for us as a department to take care of mainstream messages and avoid duplication and confusion and lead the movement all towards one direction. Since 2017, a WINS monitoring system has been set up and schools are voluntarily submitting data on their WINS status. An annual report is publicly available for transparency and accountability and will show performances of provinces and school districts. This transparent process allows for healthy competition and triggers action on subnational and local level. Also, the number of schools participating in WINS monitoring is growing, as you can see through the years, and it has shown that indeed it has become a norm to act on WINS. Well, they say what gets measured, what gets monitored gets done. Regular monitoring provides direction for schools on what to improve in the area of water, sanitation, and hygiene. The JMP report, the most recent one, showed that there is significant progress towards reaching the SDG basic service levels on hygiene and sanitation from baseline to 2022. Therefore, we are happy with our partnership with Unilever Philippines, as we recognize that there is still plenty of work ahead of us to sustain and improve these figures. And with Unilever Philippines, we are mounting a recognition program for outstanding and most improved divisions in terms of school sanitation. We envisage that incentivizing improvements will help trigger action on all levels of governance, thereby strengthening the system and ensuring that each and every Filipino child is able to go to school without having to worry about the availability of basic WASH services, which is a core part of infection prevention and control. And with that, I thank you all for your time and attention.
Justice to show the scale and how building on what the department was doing in education to build it up to be able to react. So thank you very much. And now we go to Sarah. So Sarah, finally. We've been waiting.
Finally.
Yeah, sharing us a little bit from your work in AMREF. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone. Hello everyone. As my name is Sarah Kozi, I work with AMREF Health Africa. It's an health NGO headquartered in Nairobi, and we work towards lasting health change in Africa, focusing on human resources for health, service delivery, and also investment in health. And we were proud partners to work with FCDO, Unilever, and the rest of the partners that you've seen here today. And for us, I just want to share our experience also working with the private sector. And there we are. So the first COVID-19 case was detected in Nairobi, March 2020. And that March 2020, AMREF Health Africa and partners came together to form a National Business Compact on Coronavirus, and we called it NBCC, so not so far from HBCC. And this was a group that was really unique because it brought together even partners that are normally competing for resources, like the manufacturing the manufacturers of hygiene products. They came together. There was no rivalry in there because we were all in it to make sure that we are working for the betterness of the livelihoods of the people of Kenya. And also we had communication organizations, which was really useful, especially around digital and mass media. And we even saw mass media being given a discount of 1-to-1, buy one spot, get one free, which was really a very good way to show the in-kind support that we were getting from the communications company. We had retailing companies as well, and then business networks and NGOs that also came together. And finally, the digital experts, because then we were looking at mass media, digital media, and also interpersonal at a limited scale, because then everyone was locked down. But then we had community healthcare workers who were still offering that service at community level. And so this group came together, and the aim was, one, to make sure that we are enhancing communication, and the next one was also to support government structures, because you remember all hands on deck. And so the in-kind support that we were getting, the support that we got from FCDO and Unilever, all came together to be able to be stretched across the counties that we were working in Kenya. So today, this what I'm sharing is specifically for Kenya, because then NBCC was in Kenya specifically, and now because we had such great success in the first phase, we've also expanded NBCC to the next to the other countries of Uganda and Tanzania. So, what are some of the methodologies that we used to spread the message? One was the use of sign language, because then sign language and subtitles because of inclusivity, and also working with organizations and boards that were focused on mainstreaming disability. And so we worked with them, and we had an asset called Ask Dr. Pamoja, and where it was really interactive, and also making sure that we are not leaving the people with disabilities behind. There was the use of murals, and this was all done by the people that were brought from the communities, because then looking at the talents that we had within the community, they came together, drew murals, and especially this for informal sector, because that's where you find a lot of graffitis, a lot of drawings. But then we had to make our password campaign also known there, seen there, and that was done by the local communities as well. Puppetry assets was one of the other things that we did. I mean, who doesn't love puppetry? And so this was also a very good channel of communication. And we worked with an organization called Project Hand Up to be able to deliver that. And they did quite a number of assets around the main assets that we had from Unilever, the School of Five, Magic Man's. Then we were able to develop puppetry assets for those. The other one was comics. It was dark time during that time. And so comics was really welcome. And so we worked with Shujas to be able to use the comics, and also brought together stories using the comic books that was being distributed to the young people. And remember, the young people then were also our ambassadors of change. And also because young people will be walking around, they go back with COVID. In fact, the people were more vulnerable. And so they need to know what they needed to do from their part to be able to protect the rest of the community. And lastly, technology. things which we didn't know we would do using technology, we started to use. I mean, before COVID, we would be in-person meetings, and no one would even imagine that we could do a meeting virtually. But this time round, even trainings for community healthcare workers, we used our LEAP platform at AMREF. And then we also had training of healthcare workers on COVID, also using a Jibu platform from AMREF Healthcare. And then the last one was something around connectivity. So public Wi-Fi's, which in public transportation, but also at bus stops. So before you access that public Wi-Fi, then you're able to get the messages from the password campaign, and before then you are allowed to use the Wi-Fi. So that is one of the things we used, Wi-Fi advertising. And finally, Happy Taps. And Happy Taps was very convenient because then they are movable, you can install easily, they are bright, they can be seen, you don't have to ask anyone where you want to wash your hands, you can easily see it. And so these are the things we saw across the country, but also as we speak now, we still see them being utilized. And so these are some of the methodologies that we used. With the great successes we saw in Kenya alone, we reached around 15 million.2 people. And so with this ambition now, we're looking at 75 million across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we really appreciate the support, and we'll continue working with these partners to move this to scale.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. It was well worth the wait. So now a little bit of, we have some time to have some reflections, some questions. And I think many of you kind of all, I think when we started the session, sort of looking back, remembering that time, remembering the needs. And maybe I think having this opportunity to share a little bit about maybe what your organizations were doing. What have you done now since the pandemic that you're doing differently? So maybe just have this a little bit of an open floor. We have some time. And if there's also any questions to any of our speakers today, it would be great to hear from you. So now it is an open floor. I think I have the microphone. Yeah, if there's anybody who wants to sort of say a reflection, say a thought about what you did. Any questions? Please, yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. It's been very impressive. Anybody else would like to maybe a bit of a reflection? Can I pull on some? Please, Tanya. Perfect.
Thank you, Tanya from the One Job Foundation. That's a huge work. I recognize that. It's great. And I get that the urgency made this work go towards COVID, and I know we're stuck with COVID for a little bit more, no? But since this is a bank of resources, do you plan to maybe use this platform to work on other hygiene challenges or issues that we are actually facing, other than COVID? Because I know maybe this is like looking forward or going forward, where do you take this tool? Okay. And my other question is, those resources are only accessible for members, or is it governments have access to those resources, they can implement it in HCF, schools, communities, along with NGOs that are working in those intervention zones? I would really like to understand how this had an impact on the government's strategies in health, education, culture, the ministries we work with on the field, because I know that they've been having resistance sometimes to adopt strategies related to behavior change, and this might have been a wake-up call, and maybe this is a trigger for them to adapt more. I don't know. Just
yeah, great reflections. Yep, we have some others to so thank you. Sorry. Lala, Mons, please add.
Perhaps just to is it on?
It is on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, just to directly answer to this, we worked with this HBCC program with different governments, with ministries of education and neighboring countries. We're very interested in using the same material as well as African countries. And then we were sort of using checklist systems in schools and so on. And they were interested, and we used it because it was all Creative Commons, open access, and we agreed with FCDO and Unilever and the HBCC team, and it was much appreciated. I think these materials are used in 4 or 5 other countries which are not officially HBCC partners. Yeah, so just as an example.
Yeah, and Bella, do you want to introduce where you were using them? You were mentioning your organization. Can you?
Yeah, I work for GIZ, and we work specifically on behavior change in schools, supporting ministries of education to mainstream and to implement pandemic preparedness response measures in schools. And it's all these materials are available, for example, via other websites, and the experience are feed into, for example, the Wash in Schools network or other platforms, so that there is huge openness for others to use, and also using the exchange among each others, bringing government partners together, and they get most inspired by other colleagues, not so much by government partners, but by other, not so much by development partners, but far more by other colleagues from other ministries. And that's something which had worked pretty well, just as an example.
Thank you. Any other reflections, please? Yeah.
Kate from WaterAid. It's really interesting to have seen all this, and I guess particularly FCDO and Helena. This was a really unique, she says, hopefully, a really unique period. It was a really big, global, lots coming together. And I wonder how much of what you're able to do here, maybe particularly the businesses that are competitors coming together, and the time you were prepared, Helena, to put into this, the amount of effort it takes to make something like this happen. How much of this do you think could be used again when we're not in this kind of emergency situation? I think a lot of us here would say it is a WASH emergency, but how much do you think could be recreated without it having to take COVID to do it?
Okay. Just get maybe one more. Is there another reflection before we go into some sort of insights from the panelists? Anybody else sort of? No? Okay, maybe we can start. Please, thank you. You're welcome.
I'm not sure that this is actually working.
It is on.
Really?
It's actually for the online streamline.
Okay.
So yes. So
Okay,
no worries. You're good.
I've been working with a Finnish and EU funded project in far west Nepal. So I missed some of the beginning things there, but a lot of what you've done resonates with what we tried to do in Nepal. And I mean, ranging from posters, trucks driving around with messages, radio, all that sort of thing. But I mean, interestingly, we found some unexpected benefits, at least for our project area of COVID, was the move to using online messaging and workshops and things. Because very typically work had always happened in workshops in Kathmandu, and it was a long way away from our project area. Our team could never really participate, certainly not our beneficiaries. But during COVID times, because Zoom and Teams and whatever all took off, suddenly we're able to participate in all the national meetings, in the collecting data from provincial level on what was being done on the COVID work and reporting it to nationally. And also working with beneficiaries, getting them using Zoom, for instance, the local governments, teaching them how to do it and being able to do online workshops that way, which was a great benefit, really.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't all terrible. There were some benefits, unexpectedly.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that insight and also future. So there was actually from Tanya. Tanya, I mean, Bella, you did a good job to respond, but Tanya for One Drop was asking a little bit, do you have any sort of reflections? Maybe a few of you can reflect to that. And if there's any others.
Lisa might want to pick up on the point about working with government.
Please, okay.
But just first on, I think the questions about where does this go now? That Tanya had. I think we've already been doing a lot of work as a coalition on making sure that we capture the learnings. We've obviously extended the Hygiene and Behaviour Change Coalition as well in the wake of Omicron in December last year as well, and continuing that work in a more focused way and building in the vaccine confidence messaging as well, now that we, thank goodness, touch wood, have a vaccine that works and is getting us out of this pandemic. But also we've been thinking about advocacy. And so, making sure that we actually encourage national, local governments to put the focus and prioritization behind WASH that we know they need to do, because, you know, as Kate said, it's not just one pandemic. We have a pandemic of many different diseases that kill 300,000 children a year from diseases we know how to prevent. So continuing that focus and that advocacy. One way we did that was on Global Handwashing Day in 2020. We brought together all of our local Unilever businesses, the network of embassies and high commissions that FCDO have, local and national governments and local NGOs to really put a focus behind what a campaign that we called H for Handwashing. So when you are young and you learn the alphabet, whichever alphabet you learn, in English it would be the ABCD alphabet, we're saying H should stand for handwashing in that, and we should make sure kids are learning about handwashing. It's in every curriculum, and we had a lot of success with pushing that message, and we'll be doing similar this year for Global Handwashing Day as well. But I think that's really where we're coming from, and also it's a model that we could scale up. You know, should there be another pandemic, it's a model we know works. It's a model we can implement quite quickly, and that work continues. Kate, you had a question about, you know, could you bring this together outside of a pandemic context? I think my answer would be Unilever already does. It has done since 2010. We've reached 1.3 billion people with our hygiene behaviour change programme. So we continue this work because, you know, as I've said, there's other pandemics going on, even if not the big COVID one.
Great, thank you. Yeah, really important questions. So I think I'm just going to take the one around kind of what happens after, but I don't want to preempt too much Anne's comments, which are coming up. But so we extended the Hygiene Behaviour Change Coalition, as Helena said, but extended with the aim of thinking about what's happening after as well. So yes, it was a unique situation, but it's, as you say, you know, actually hand hygiene and hygiene behaviour change is not unique. It happens outside of all of that, and it's really important. So what we're emphasizing in this second phase, as well as kind of integrating some of the vaccine messages so that we're using all of our resources efficiently and kind of, you know, acknowledging that there are lots of different aspects to this pandemic and that people's worries and concerns are shifting as well. So I think that's important. But the other aspect that we've really emphasized in the second phase is to work with governments, with institutions, with partners locally to embed some of the learning that came out of the first phase, to embed kind of the tools, as Bella mentioned, you know, with the Ministry of Education. Well, they were co-developed actually, but the same goes for other tools and kind of using the media and how to set up those contracts, how to deliver this in country beyond kind of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think I just want to make a plug as well for WASH and healthcare facilities. Just that is absolutely critical as well for making sure that we are better prepared in future. And so, you know, there's an element of advocacy as well in all of this. We just have to make sure hand hygiene remains on the agenda, that there is political leadership around it, that there is interest, and that goes through a whole range of things, but that we mentioned, but also in financing WASH and healthcare facilities, working with our health sector colleagues, which is kind of what we talked about this morning, to make sure that hygiene is not just a WASH issue, it's also a health issue. And without our health colleagues kind of pushing that on the agenda with AMR, with IPC, and embedding that in those agendas, you know, we won't move forward. So it's really important to do that as well. Robert, do you want to say something about the material being available?
Great. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. So all of the learning materials, all of the webinars, all of the learning briefs and technical reports that we've done as part of the Hygiene Hub are now fully accessible on our website, and they will remain there. Internet is surprisingly cheap to maintain, so we got it for a while. As part of the extension with HBCC, we are now extending kind of our part. So we're constantly in the process of updating those. I think, you know, science is unfortunately a little bit slower than pandemic. So a lot of the new learnings we're still systematizing and trying to get those out there and working on various ways, various avenues of dissemination for some of the key insights that we've been able to kind of pull together during this process. I also do think it's important, you know, we can think about kind of, you know, the focus of COVID-19 on hand hygiene and what we learned about hygiene behavior change. I think one thing that we do need to remember is that wasn't the only behavior that suddenly got pushed out there and got pushed out very quickly. There was all kinds of new messages on mask use, on social distancing that were quite foreign to people. I remember personally needing to go to a grocery store, watching a YouTube tutorial about how to take a bandana and basically tie it to my face with rubber bands. Everybody was in this situation. And what do we know about things like mask use, social distancing, and a lot of kind of the real innovation that I think we were able to be part of, not necessarily lead, but at least document, was take all those insights that we do have on hygiene behaviors and hygiene behavior change and apply those to some very new and novel behaviors that were quite foreign to a number of people, you know, myself included. So there's so much that was to learn and that we're in the process of trying to pull together. But we are working to try to make sure that that information is out there with many of our partners. This is actually my first time meeting Sarah, who was one of our online partners that we engaged with over Zoom on local learning initiatives throughout COVID-19. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think also, getting on your point too, on having it embedding it into the institutions is also very, very key. Any other interest, insights, reflections, questions? And even perhaps even from the country perspective, you might also want to give some, feel free to ask questions as well.
Hi, Rosemary Campbell from Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor. I think with the hand washing, it's been a fantastic exercise and project, but it's also surely, as well as saving COVID from many people, I mean, the flu epidemic that usually happens every winter in the UK just didn't happen. Surely there are other diseases like that are also being suppressed or maybe better under control. Have there been any measures of those put in place or found or measured or monitored?
Okay. So is this a specific question to just the generalists, the panelists, or Hygiene Hub, or would you like to? Yeah, maybe perhaps it goes to Hygiene Hub. Do we put you on the spot there, Robert? We do. Yeah.
It's really what other diseases have been suppressed the same way as flu was in the UK by doing all this hand washing and so on. I just wondered if there's been any monitoring or evaluation on those other diseases.
Sure, I can try to answer. I'm a behavioral scientist, not kind of a field epidemiologist. You know, I do think we did see in a number of countries this decline in other diseases. But I think, you know, I think kind of overemphasizing or kind of even focusing on what was gained through some of that, I do think has the potential to lull us into kind of a state of complacency, because we've all seen now, kind of now that we've normalized ourselves to COVID, if you look at daily infection rates, these are levels that would cause countries to freak out if they had them 2 years ago. So a lot of these things kind of, you know, the massive, you know, the protective effect, will it ever be possible to quantify that? You know, it's who knows? I mean, how the extent to which we were able to really track some of those things. I think really, if, you know, kind of in the long run, you know, there are things, but there's still so much that was missed because of COVID. So even if we were presenting flu, we were still kids were out of schools for such long extended periods. So, you know, there's a very kind of nuanced trade-off in some of this disease prevention, along with the social consequences that came with many of those things. So
Thank you. Did you want to? Yeah, I didn't think you. So just take this. Great. We just send it forward. Great.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think Robert's right in terms of it is difficult to quantify the impact. But what we do know is that many people adopted a habit that they will probably keep coming out of the pandemic, both through the HBCC, but also, you know, in the wider pandemic context. And that will inevitably be beneficial for preventing a range of diseases, not just COVID. But I think we also know that other things got impacted. Kids were missing school. A lot of kids missed routine childhood immunisations during COVID as well, which we are seeing the impacts of now further down the line. So there are those gaps as well that we have to close, and also just keep up that habit. You've learned that habit. I mean, I know just me personally, I think I definitely wash my hands more coming out of the pandemic, even though before the pandemic I was the only one in my friends group who banged on about hand washing with soap all the time. So I think all of us have adopted that habit more, but it's maintaining it going forward as well.
And great, and actually probably a great segue. If there isn't additional questions, we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present, and now we're looking a little bit into the future. So with that, I'm going to invite again Leonard and Ann Thomas to join us here. So we come slowly in. Great.
Thanks very much.
Yes. And so just want to introduce you. Yes, so Ann Thomas is with UNICEF. She is the, excuse me, I'm just going to get my notes properly here. She is the Senior Advisor for Sanitation and Hygiene at UNICEF with about 2 decades of experience, and she is an environmental engineer. And I think here she can share with us some of the recent work that UNICEF has done, and really sort of understanding how we collectively came together for the COVID response, and how we can do more in the future to stop the spread of infection. So please, and I am going to hand this to you because you need that so they can hear you.
So much,
Thanks.
Belinda. And I'm kind of wearing 2 hats here because when the pandemic started, I was in Indonesia leading UNICEF's response, and I was actually a HBCC recipient at the time. But then I transitioned to New York, where I then led this sort of global coalition looking at high-level advocacy to governments and sort of strengthening government commitment to hygiene and IPC. So I wanted to reflect a little bit on these things, and I'm probably going to speak to 3 main points. The first is really, the country-level response to the pandemic. And then secondly, the global response, how the global community responded to this. And then thirdly, what were some of the lessons specifically from HBCC and the work that we were doing in countries that can kind of inform what needs to happen going forward. So, firstly, COVID was a very unique moment in time in that it put hygiene and IPC in the public policy realm for the first time in a way that no other pandemic had done before. We had, small outbreaks, the SARS outbreak, et cetera. Interest in hand hygiene was there for a little while, and then it was gone. But with COVID, we saw governments really panicking because they wanted to get kids back in school, they wanted to get businesses back up and running, and they needed hygiene protocols, and they needed something more than just wash your hands. They really needed to embed it in public policy. So that, revealed all kinds of deficiencies in terms of accountability. Who's in charge of hand washing anyway in a country when we need hand washing everywhere? Do we have funding for this? How do we do it? It revealed huge capacity gaps at country level. It also revealed things like supply chain gaps. So we didn't, have good hand washing stations that could be sent around the country that were affordable, et cetera. It revealed so much to countries. And, in that sense, it was a huge opportunity for the global community. So globally, the global community reacted to that. And I know I was part of this state of hygiene report that came out that focused on hand hygiene in particular. And, we basically tried to galvanize all the big players in hand hygiene around, 5 simple messages for governments to rally around this issue of hand hygiene, to take advantage now, to put it in your policy so that you will never have to revisit this again. And it was, around financing, make sure you got the right financing in place, make sure you have the policies in place, the capacity, the right innovations to drive it. And I'm missing one. Policy, financing, innovation, and innovations, I think. If I didn't say that. Anyway, I saw my next slide. Let me just go to that next slide. That's why I had it. Data and information. That was sort of a critical one, right? If you didn't know what was happening and whether people were practicing a behavior, it's hard to drive this sort of hygiene policy per se in government. So UNICEF sort of adopted this acceleration framework, which is also the same one that UN Water has used for the SDG 6 acceleration framework. And State of Hygiene was born. We had the HBCC at that time supporting 20 countries where we worked, and we were able to very quickly support these countries in implementing and preparing hygiene strategies, supporting capacity work. And so it was fantastic in that sense. And HBCC was interesting because we have some really great lessons from it. And I'm not going to give you all the examples, but a couple really stood out from a few countries that sort of dug into the governance issue and around the data and policy, and then around the innovation. So the first one was around governance. And in South Africa, you know, the governance work actually started well before the COVID pandemic. The government of South Africa in 2014 undertook to do a hand washing strategy for the country. And they really did a deep dive, and I know because I worked with them on it, to look at institutional accountabilities. They really wanted to come up with the answer to who's in charge of hand washing in the country. And so they had all the ministries come together, they did a sector review, and they really parsed it out. So it was a really kind of laborious task in a non-emergency time. But that gave them a strategy. So when COVID hit, and we had the support from HBCC, they were very quickly able to transition into a COVID strategy and clearly delineate who was in charge of what, and to have the associated budget lines. So that was a real lesson for us, in that doing that homework on accountability frameworks and the governance structures is a really important thing to drive hand washing programs and hygiene generally. A second case came around the data and information. So we had a lot of countries that were, launching these massive emergency responses, sending supplies all over the country, but with no way of tracking it. And so in a number of countries, they set up this Rapid Pro real-time monitoring systems that, quickly enabled the government to have a look at where things were going, where there were deficiencies in the response efforts. And in many of those countries, Myanmar was one of them, we had governments that are now adopting those same systems for sort of the future. That's going to be their emergency response sort of monitoring mechanism. The other one I want to talk about was capacity. Sorry, I said I was only going to do 3, but I'm actually going to do 4. Capacity was huge. HBCC in Indonesia, where I was working, we used the HBCC funds to drive a national capacity building initiative for frontline workers. And so, it was something that should have been done a long time before, but this funding allowed us to sort of bridge programs across UNICEF, the World Bank, the different ministries, and we all agreed that there should be one program for sort of building capacity of frontline staff. And so, having that capacity in the country to do behavior change, and it wasn't just around hand washing, it was around behavior change. So really like this idea of how do you use these skills for any behavior, right? It wasn't just around hand washing, was hugely important. And in Brazil as well, we used the HBCC funds to work on a behavior change program and launch a formative assessment report with the country that then they use to develop materials that they'll use going forward. And then just on the innovation part, one thing we saw was that there were supply chain issues across the board in terms of getting supplies out quick enough. And, it allowed us to work with the private sector to understand what some of the gaps are in the market, what could be stockpiled for future emergencies. And so we developed these IPC procurement systems that sort of set healthcare centers up to, sort of one button click, that if there is a future pandemic, here's who you call, these are the suppliers and where you would procure supplies from. Overall, we were able to capacitate 36,000 healthcare workers through this program, and we think this is something that's, a huge investment for the future in setting up countries up for success. But I think the big takeaway is you don't want to be doing any of this in real time. You want all of this to be happening in advance. I think we've made a huge investment in the last couple of years, but I think it's, it's just, I think COVID really shed light on how unprepared we were. And so I think the lesson really is, let's keep investing in this and keep moving forward. So on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne, for sharing that with us and looking forward. And so now we're back again, full circle, past, present, and future. Thank you, Leonard.
So just a few things picking up on what we've covered. Some of the things that struck me this afternoon is, just a sense of the scale, right? 1.2 billion people reached, particular initiatives within it reaching 200 million plus, 78 million units of products, mostly soap and hand sanitizer. The scale of what this has been just something else. I think there'll be quite a lot to do to understand the longer term legacy of it. Some of these behaviours, was there regression? What things were sustained? I wonder with Unilever whether you found that soap sales increased, some of the other proxies. So over time, it'll be really interesting to hear some of the longer term impacts. From a sanitation and water perspective, we're interested how a greater level of engaging with hand washing, how that creates demand for. We know that good sanitation, good water comes when citizens demand it, not when governments, donors or governmental agencies sort of push supply. So this is a demand program and it can really change things in the sector. So that element. Something really struck me from the example from the Philippines, which is that you had a statistic that school sanitation had gone from 39% to 74%, meeting the JMP standard in 4 years, from 2018 to 2022. That's really remarkable. That's a difference to millions of, particularly important for girls. So there have been a few nuggets within this that have been just really, really critical. These have been very clever interventions, right? Whether it's puppets, celebrities, cartoons, jingles, there's a lot of thought behind these. These are really thought through. They're working in very different cultural contexts, reaching different communities, different groups within those communities. So it's there's a lot of very, very intelligent programming within all of these things. And then the last couple of things, I'd really commend this booklet. There's lots of copies of it. There's a lot of rich detail in here. And then lastly, one way this continues is all of our engagement with Global Handwashing Day. Every year, October 15th, it's a lot in schools, lots of countries, in every year. It's a huge thing. Lots of kids engage, and all of us, through all of our work, can help support that through planning for it, seeing whether any of our ongoing work can really engage with Global Handwashing Day. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So that does bring our session to close, but I do want to kind of maybe take some reflection of this session. I think we have been very impressed. I want to thank all the speakers today, those who shared country stories and case studies, as well as those who really gave us the sort of the insights of what it was like to establish it. And I think in kind of some of the reflections, when we talk about the massive scale, when we talk also about the use of media, and also the movement that really created all the way down, institutionalized into programs, I think this is very, very key, into government programming, and this is very key. So moving forward, this model potentially is the blueprint for looking at massive scale interventions. And there will be, unfortunately, if we look at the situation with climate change, then there will be other crises. And how can we continue to keep hygiene core and center of preparedness programs, humanitarian, whichever the case it is? And this is potentially a solution through the power of partnerships. And I think we saw it beautifully here, and it just, hopefully the momentum continues. So thank you all for taking your time to hear. I hope you found it as insightful as I did. And thank you also to Unilever, FCDO, UNICEF, the Ministry of Education, AMREF, WaterAid. Thank you all very, very much.